The next 6 or so verses are about the ego soul and the Skandhas. And the translator has said that some of these verses seem to contradict one another, and some really violate the Buddhist doctrine of non-Atman, as far as we know. And it's quite troublesome the way this term ego soul has been brought into play. And if you're a Buddhist, it's not on really. But we are not in this channel and in the spirit of Zen interested in beliefs. You are not being asked to believe in an ego soul. This can't really be stressed enough. In Zen, words point to what is. And you can use whatever words you like as long as they fuel this purpose. So what on earth can an ego soul be pointing to? Well, by one of these serendipitous coincidences, somebody posted a video on Facebook by Ken Wilber, and it was very succinct and to the point, and it dovetailed nicely with what I said in, I think, the previous video in relationship to this matter. In the previous video, I asked you to address this sense that you might have of a being looking out onto the world. In Ken Wilber's video, and I'll put a link to it in the notes if I can find it, it was a video to do with something called Big Mind. In his video he talked about coming to a sense of I am, sense of I-Amness, which puts it perhaps a little more clearly than I did in the previous video. And then as you explore this I-Amness, you find it's the same as the unborn. It is not something that came into existence. It is not something that disappears from existence. I don't think Ken Wilber calls it the unborn. This is the term I use, but it's the same as what we've been speaking about as mind itself, chitta, suchness, and so on. It's essentially what we turn to in our enlightenment practice. So when Ken Wilber talks about I-Amness, he's not talking about a personal ego. And so what I'm going to do is suggest that this is what this term ego soul in these verses is referring to. It's referring to this sense of I-Amness. I am is the constant. Everything else is changing. But this sense of a me looking out onto the world, this I am, is, has, and always will be, is outside the stream of time. So this I-Amness gives us access. It's a way of getting access to the unborn, to what the Buddha calls Nibbana in the early Pali texts, Nirvana. So we have the tools now to make something of these verses. Rather than get upset about their terminology, let us apply them as we always do in our enlightenment practice. So verse 757. Imagining that a melodious sound obtains in a lute, a conch-shell, or in a kettle-drum, the unintelligent thus seeks something of an ego soul within the Skandhas. Now, the idea of an ego soul and the Skandhas are two opposing doctrines. The Buddhists came up with this understanding of the Skandhas to dismantle the notion of an ego soul. So it's quite a different thing to what I was talking about. The ego soul is the idea, it's the belief. The ego soul in traditional Hindu spirituality is the belief in some permanent essence which transmigrates from birth to birth. And this understanding is limiting if you're an enlightenment practitioner, because it reinforces some notion of self in relation to an external world. So let's say we've gone beyond that though, and we've come to appreciate the truth of the Skandhas, that there are only certain factors in operation, certain factors to do with the attention being hijacked by forms, certain feelings associated with this, certain psychological tendencies which build up in relation to particular forms and feelings, reinforcing the belief in the reality of a world being perceived by an individual here through the senses. This is the mechanism of the Skandhas, which has been explored in some detail in the past. The thing is, that is not enough. That is not enough. That is good at dismantling the notion of a jiva, of an individual soul. But it isn't going to take you to insight. It isn't going to take you to liberation. And it's like the Skandhas are being played here, like an instrument. They're being strummed, like a lute is strummed. They're being blown, like a conch shell is blown. They're being banged, like a kettle drum is banged, as if we're going to get to some sort of insight here. The thing is, this I-Amness is what leads us to insight. Where does this I-Amness fit in with the Skandhas? Well, the Skandhas is an analysis. It is a way of breaking things down. What we have to ask ourselves is, what is it that is aware of the Skandhas? What is it that is aware of the Skandhas? What is it that is doing the analysing? What is it that is doing the analysing? So we have to come back from the Skandhas to I-Amness, what is described here as the ego soul, because it's not going to be found in the Skandhas, no matter how you study them, no matter what approach you take. And we can rest assured that the ancient Buddhists would have spent an awful long time studying and dissecting these Skandhas, coming up with lots of sub-lists and so on. So this is a side effect of the Skandhas. You can start to get caught up in analytical thinking, which is what's being presented here by all this almighty noise. But the true melodious sound isn't coming from the instruments, it's coming from the one that is playing them. And this is awareness itself. This is awareness itself. Awareness itself which we can access through I-Amness. And we must understand I-Amness has got absolutely nothing to do with the personal psychological ego. It's got nothing to do with our sensibilities. It's got nothing to do with our psychology. It's got nothing to do with our moods. It is essentially transcendent. We have access to it. Come back to this sense of looking out onto the world. But then don't get caught up in thoughts about it. Abide in this. It's what I've called in the past a sense of being. It's when the attention is coming to rest in itself. It is no longer emoting in a reality out there. It is no longer investing in a reality out there or in here. In here is also out there, remember. The world, our body, our feelings, our thoughts, they are all out there. They are all avenues which can hijack the attention. So rest. Allow the attention to rest. And appreciate the Buddha-like nature of the serenity that you find here.